Tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. A seed planted today takes root and grows into a tree that bears fruit in the future. Over 110 years ago, a seed was planted. Today, that seed, the idea of excellence, has grown into the University of Pretoria, South Africa's largest contact research-intensive university. 9 faculties and a business school are spread across 7 beautiful campuses, which are home to over 50,000 students, ready to make an impact in the world beyond university and join our global network of nearly 300,000 alumni. Future-focused, sustainably developed facilities and cutting-edge multi- and transdisciplinary research are underpinned by a desire to transform lives and have a positive impact on communities and the world. Excellence in teaching, learning, research innovation, arts and culture, and sports puts us firmly amongst the world's best universities. Knowledge is not just what is in books. It is the wisdom to apply it, to nourish and nurture the seed so that it takes root, grows tall, bears fruit, and branches out. UP plants that seed, that tiny bit of curiosity, creativity, critical thinking, hope, the desire to care, respect, help, and innovate against all odds, to grow, to leave your mark, to excel, to challenge the norm, to think, to rethink, to discover, to inquire, to lead, to have courage, to make a difference, and to persevere. This is the University of Pretoria. We make today and every day matter.
Dumelang bagaetsho, molweni, sanibonani, avutsheni, thobela, goeiemôre. Good morning. Many people look very solemn this morning. I don't know if there's something going on that happened that terrified everyone who's here or demoralized you. I'd rather you be happier than you look currently, because to us it's an auspicious occasion. We're very proud of this event that finally we got it underway, and we're looking forward to hearing words of inspiration, motivation, encouragement from all the speakers who have been lined up here. And I checked them out, and I was just wondering to myself if I know them from anywhere. And I realized that I actually know them. And I've been privileged to interact with them different times, different levels. And I'm not their age, at least the ones to the right-hand side, right? So as much as I can claim to be familiar with them, I don't mean we hang out together or the stories they tell about what happened, I was there or I know anything about them. But some I would know because recently I had a webinar with Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu and Dr. Sam Motsuenyane, and thank you for having been part of that discussion, and it was a wonderful time. And Professor Kupe, I've not had the opportunity to congratulate you on your appointment to be the VC of University of Pretoria, but congratulations, it's not too late. We used to harass and hassle you in Joburg, and as I said earlier, that you ran away, I don't see you anywhere. But you live in Joburg, so we'll catch you there. And Paul, thank you very much for bringing your youthful energy to making sure that we have this event here today. So we are having the 3rd annual lecture dedicated to Dr Sam Motsuenyane, who is our leader and patron of the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane Development Foundation. We will hear more about it. I don't want to rush and say this and the other. I've got all the qualified people here. Even their titles speak for themselves, right? Actually, one of my young nephews once asked me and said, you call people Professor so-and-so or Doctor this, Doctor that. When in your case, they just say hater. Is that your title? I said, no, well, it's because I'm the common man, you see, and that's how we are referred to. Okay, we're going to hear from the University of Pretoria, the Camerata Choir first, And then we get the formal proceedings underway. Thank you. Well, thanks to the choir for giving us a bit of vavavoom. I noticed that we sort of woke up and came alive. But this is an esteemed place. I understand why everybody would be so disciplined and low-key. I'd like to thank the members of your staff, Professor Tawana Kupe, for the hospitality they extended to us this morning. They gave me an opportunity to run a meeting from another place, and it's a beautiful place, I must say. I wish I were much younger than I am now. I would stop roaming the streets and come and spend more time here studying and learning. Let me acknowledge the MEC for Economic Development and Agriculture of Gauteng, our sister. She's from Garankuwa, actually. Morakani Musupia. So we groom them well. In Harankua, we make sure that, you know, they get up to something good. And she's now part of the Gauteng government. And thanks for making time to be with us here as we honor and respect Dr Sam Motsuenyane, and whose Rural Development Foundation works with over 3,000 farmers nationally. And Paul will tell us a bit more about that. And this is the third of the annual lectures that we started hosting most recently. Again, I would leave those to our chairman. The next speaker is the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Pretoria, and he's been since January of 2019. Professor Kupe has been appointed International Council member of the International Association for Media and Communication Research. So he's a man up my street. I must connect with him very closely to learn more about what they get up to in that association. Well, here's a brief story about what the Association for Media and Communication Research is all about. They aim to support and develop media and communication research throughout the world, and particularly they encourage the participation of emerging scholars, women, and those from economically disadvantaged regions. Professor Kupe is also a council member and trustee of the Association of Commonwealth Universities, the ACU, which is an international organization dedicated to building a better world through higher education by bringing universities together from around the world and helping to advance knowledge, to promote understanding, to broadening the minds and improving the lives. And it is through what he's about to do that they improve the lives and broaden our minds. Welcoming remarks from you, the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Tawana Kupe. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Modise. You're well famous, of course, for your activities on television and radio. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to all of you. But first, to matters of protocol. Dr. Sam Motsuenyane, in whose honor we are holding this lecture, and we are greatly honored that you approached us at the University of Pretoria to host the third lecture. I've had some side discussions with Paul here. I suspect this lecture is going to live here forever, but that is a matter for outside. Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu, Chancellor of the University of Pretoria. And allow me to stop there. Last Friday, we had the launch of one of his books that is outside, Enabler or Victim. When we started publicizing the lecture, a lot of students wrote to me saying, "Why were you demoted?" I said, "No, you don't understand. A university has a chancellor and a vice-chancellor. I have my job, but as a vice to the chancellor." And also our distinguished presenter for the third, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane lecture, the Honorable MEC. And then I understand, given we're doing this as a hybrid, that there are people in this room, but there are hundreds of other people who are actually online. And also it is incumbent upon me to recognize them, but not necessarily by name. So I understand there's a number of VVIPs and VIPs, and also seated among us is a veteran also of the media and many other sectors, Dr. Tammy Mazwai, who I've known for a long time, and an accomplished South African of many achievements. Distinguished guests, all protocol observed. You understand also that there are not only people who are listening from South Africa or have tuned in from South Africa, but across the world. So allow me to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of us, you joining us today. Today, we are proud to host the third Dr. Sam Motsuenyane address, which will be delivered by Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu, Chancellor of the University of Pretoria. It is an honor to host such an address, given Dr. Motsuenyane's contribution to a sustainable future and vision of Africa's food security and systems at this campus. This campus, as you know, is called the Future Africa Institute and Campus. It was launched on the 23rd of March in 2019. Future Africa was designed along the principles held dear by Dr. Motsuenyane and his foundation. All the gardens you see around here are forageable. We professors like to use words that are sound very sophisticated. Actually, this forageable is a very simple thing. It means you can eat some of the plants in the garden. So across over there is our dining hall for this complex. So when we make salads there, we actually do not go to Woolies or Checkers or any of those. We actually harvest from our own garden, which is one important principle of sustainability. Also, many of the plants you will see in this complex are from all over the continent. South Africa and the African continent are known for plant diversity, which is disappearing because of climate change and so on. But plant diversity is very important to our history, our identity as Africans, and the sustainability of the continent and humanity. So in this place, we also carry out research to ensure that South Africa and Africa do not lose their diversity. So, as I said, the gardens you see around, you can eat some of the plants, and the entire campus is built on green and sustainable design principles, which adds a touch of agrarian charm to urban living. I'm quite sure you drove through my cows over there. We do not use those cows to pay for anyone's lobola. They are for research. Of course, the campus is also the hub of our transdisciplinary research, which cuts across all 9 of our faculties to create innovative African solutions to African challenges, some of which are global. The word transdisciplinary needs explanation here. Transdisciplinary research is different from the research that we academics normally do. So I'm glad to hear that the MEC is here with us. Typically, the way academics do research is that we think about the problem inside the walls of the academy. We then find a solution among ourselves as academics. Yeah, we talk to you, we come and do research. And then we might come up with solutions there. So it's typically the kind of research you can call, it's a solution looking for a problem. But often if a solution, what happens if the solution does not find the problem? Or the problem is different because of context. And the African context is very, very complex, given the layers of things that have, if you like, undermined Africa and South Africa's growth: slavery, colonialism, apartheid, and all of those other forces that have come in the wake of those major narratives. So you need very specific solutions specific to our context. And the icons sitting on my right-hand side are well-renowned, and not just South African renowned, because they were sensitive to that context. So in this facility, we're going to be doing research where we ask society, what are the challenges? And then in finding a solution, we work with society to find the challenges. So we reverse the idea of a solution from a textbook looking for a problem. We rather find a problem and work together to look for a solution. That is the purpose of this campus, because Dr. Motsuenyane and Prof. Wiseman Nkuhlu will tell you that decades, if not centuries, of development theories against Africa have not worked precisely because they did not follow that approach. Someone else said, the Africans have this problem, here is the solution, and then the solution did not work. We hope that working together with society, and that is why Dr. Motsuenyane, I hope the lecture lives here, because it will be a reminder of the kind of research we should do to be relevant to our context and relevant to our people. Alongside this campus is our Engineering 4.0 complex, which is just a kilometer that way, which we are going to launch with Minister Mbalula 10 days from now. This complex is about all things transport, but all things digital, or if you like, 4IR of transport. We've finished it, we built it together with SANRAL and the CSIR. Again, following the principle of transdisciplinarity, we're going to build facilities to address South Africa's problems, working together with our national and private sector institutions. That will be, it's working already. So it's for smart mobility, smart cities, and also the kind of transport that is appropriate to our circumstances. Dr. Motsuenyane, allow me to tell you, and when you have time, I would like to take you there and show you this facility, because it is going to be quite close to your heart, given your focus on agriculture. In that facility, some of the research we are doing is how to assist municipalities, national agencies to build infrastructure that enables small farmers to deliver their produce in ways in which they can get good market value. So we are using all of the latest technologies. So yesterday or the day before, a truck left Tshwane last week and arrived in Cape Town carrying tomatoes and avocados. But inside some of them was a computer chip which was sending live data to us. And we can tell that the tomato was damaged because of the road surface, the temperature in the truck, all of those things, and the environment it is. This will extend to what we are also starting to build, where the cows are, Innovation Africa at UP, which focuses on smart, sustainable, and precision agriculture. Because of climate change and other things like that, we can no longer farm the way we used to do. Dr. Motsuenyane will tell you that from the people that he services or works with the 3,000 farmers, is that they will tell you that the seasons have changed and we can no longer plant where we used to plant. The seeds we used to plant and the inputs we used to no longer work anymore. So now you need actually to use some of the latest technology. Say, how much water is needed? How do you deal with the change in seasons? What can you plant now? And how do you create a sustainable agriculture? Well, of course, as you are aware, the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane Rural Development Foundation works with over 3,000 farmers nationally, mainly to assist them with access to markets, capital, and technical information. So the next letter I'm going to be writing to Dr. Motsuenyane is for a partnership with your foundation together with our research, our new research institutes, because the people that you are working with are exactly the people that the university would like to have an impact with, but not coming as a solution looking for a problem, but working with the 3,000 farmers to say, what are your problems and how do we develop solutions? So the letter will be in the mail in the next coming weeks. The foundation also arranges scholarships and internships for agricultural graduates and contributes to the land reform discourse to seek sustainable solutions. The University of Pretoria is known for its well-developed and well-regarded programs in agriculture, agricultural economics, veterinary science. We are the only university with a veterinary science faculty at the moment, all of which support our goal of promoting and enhancing food security and sustainability in South Africa and Africa by producing well-rounded graduates who are an asset to their workplace and society and have the skills and knowledge to start their own businesses as entrepreneurs. All our students have access to free online work readiness and entrepreneurial courses, which give them the skills that make them sought after. We are part of the African Research Universities Alliance, ARUA, Center of Excellence in Food Systems, and are home to the Institute of Food Nutrition and Well-Being, amongst other related specialties. We really believe that you cannot be a university in Africa and achieve the sustainable development goals and improve the well-being of our people. And that all of the 17, you see I'm wearing this, is the 17 sustainable development goals, will only lead to a better life for all South Africans and a much more sustainable life. Just as Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu made a pioneering professional achievement as the first black chartered accountant, despite the odds staked against him during apartheid, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane became the first black extension officer in agriculture and conservation in the late 1940s. Dr. Motsuenyane has chaired many black business organizations, such as the African Bank and the National African Federated Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He has dedicated all his life to pioneering and promoting entrepreneurship and black business in the townships, which is to reverse the very negative effects of colonialism and apartheid. The entrepreneurial corporate successes of the likes of Prof. Nkuhlu and Dr. Motsuenyane should inspire our students to emulate them. The high quality of teaching and research training at UP should enable them to achieve these goals, following in the footsteps of the giants. It is particularly encouraging that UP student cohorts consist of a majority of black students, most of who are female. So a whole 65% of our students at the University of Pretoria now are black, majority of them being what we call black African. 55% are women, which means also we are addressing the issue of gender equality. It is also particularly poignant to note for the future transformation of the agricultural sector and for sustainable food systems, how many black students, some from rural communities, are enrolled, excelling, and enjoying our programs in agriculture, veterinary science. We need most black students in veterinary science, soil and plant sciences, as well as in forestry and biotechnology, which is where everything is going these days. We hope that in future, the paths opened and the barriers broken by the trailblazers, Prof. Nkuhlu and Dr. Motsuenyane, enable the thousands of capable, experienced, and enthusiastic graduates we produce to make everyday matter and make a decisive difference in society to address the multiple challenges that our society in South Africa faces: unemployment, poverty, growing inequality, and the quest to create sustainable and meaningful lives, and for everybody to achieve their full potential as a human being. In this way, like the icons we are celebrating today, Paul, I consider this lecture a celebration of the icons. They also leave a lasting, positive legacy and impact on the world. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the University of Pretoria. I'm sure that today's lecture will benefit you as you partake from the wisdom of both icons. I thank you.
Prof, thank you very much for your remarks and also sharing with us what the university is up to and the achievements and the milestones and the objectives that you've set for yourselves here, and we appreciate that. I'll see you before the end of the year. We've already spoken, right? So that we can take the story to an even broader audience, much as we have a very esteemed audience here and also joining us virtually. Well, if you want to learn something in life, apparently you better get closer to the mentors, because the mentors have got a memory and experience that they can share with you for free. Starting with Dr. Sam Motsuenyane here, having started to work in the late 40s. Can you believe that? Sure. And then you have the opportunity of having tea with him, and then he can share with you the experience of how things were done then in the 50s and 60s, and you get that for free. So I've been very privileged, Dr. Motsuenyane, to spend so many hours and meetings and so on with you and learn from you. And recently, Prof, when we had the discussion, I was very impressed with the fact that both of you were emphasizing values of solidarity, of self-respect, of personal dignity, of self-reliance. You know, those things don't make the news headlines. They are not events. They are things that you internalize, and they guide and direct your life if you can absorb them. But where are we going to get them except from your lived experiences, as well as the example that you set for ourselves? So one more time, I'd like to appreciate that. The other thing I need to mention is I got to know Dr. Sam Motsuenyane in the 70s when they came to open. I think it was the first branch of the African Bank then. And I was still a very young person, a child, basically, a teenager. I couldn't believe that, with respect, black people own a bank. Before 1976, actually. So it's important to note this point, because to me personally, as a human being, as an individual, as a child, I realized then that there was more to the story of any people, particularly black people, at the time when we were made to believe that you don't really amount to much. This was before 76, by the way. Now you see for yourself that these people are capable to even have a bank where you live. Obviously, from then on, you start to expect a lot from yourself as a human being. So my self-esteem personally was hugely boosted by that very fact, and it made me pay attention to people like you, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane, and say, these people must be up to something. I see Bragep Mukoko is here as well. Let me acknowledge you, sir. And Brawili, thanks again. These are the two gentlemen who made sure that I get closer to Dr. Motsuenyane through their own ways, formally and informally. So today we are here. So, Paul Ntsabele is the chairperson of the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane Rural Development Foundation. He's an agronomist, agribusiness, and land reform leader. His passion is food security, even though he does not feed us when we come to the meeting. So he never asked if we were feeling food secure or we were happy with whatever. But nevertheless, I'm sure he's working on a bigger mission than our immediate food security. He's held various leadership roles at the University of Pretoria and was part of the Students in Free Enterprise. He does pro bono work with smallholder farmers throughout the country and volunteers in various agricultural platforms. And he is the United States Department of Agriculture Cochrane Fellow, member of the South African Society of Horticultural Science and the Land Rehabilitation Society of Southern Africa. He has worked throughout the agricultural value chain as an agronomist, fruit and vegetable procurement officer, lab quality control technician, extension officer, emerging market manager, product development specialist, and business development for multinational business such as McCain. The guy chips still. You bring us any, no chips today. Sakata Seeds and ShopRite Group. He's also worked as consultant to the Japanese government, and he's the founding member of the newly launched South African Agricultural Development Agency led by Mr. Rolf Meyer. And he's the founder of the SA Food Gardens Organization, a food security initiative. He's our chairman, and we deliberately put an experienced person of his age to be our leader so that the chain is not broken and that he becomes the seed for the future. It would be pointless to get a person like myself to lead this when I'm more focused on what Professor Kupe is into. When we have a person who can give us the chips. We thought the Tlamo packaging, so he was educating us that actually they come from the ground. Paul, please come and introduce Professor Nkuhlu. Thank you, sir.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, all protocol observed. Prof, you know, what just happened now is tantamount to practicing for the Olympics final. And when you get to the ring, they tell you, you know what, you don't have to do anything. The medal is yours. You've already won. So it's both exciting, but also, you know, there was a lot of preparation involved. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue. I'm driving to the venue on your right. We passed the University of Pretoria's dairy farm. Prof. Kupe mentioned it. I used to dread waking up at 4 a.m. in the morning to go milk cows, especially the night before when we had buy one, get one free at Herguntes in Hatfield Square. When we slept late, and right next to the campus, I spent many Sundays and Saturdays looking at plants when I was doing my master's in agronomy. I spent a lot of time honing my skills in making a killer punch northeast from here, where we used to have functions with the university like pot and ponds. So I'm very fond of this university, and it's so good to be back home in familiar grounds. And back during our time, we used to say "tex of necks," and I think it was Professor Pistorius. We used to call ourselves the Innovasi Generasi. And Prof, you might ask yourself, why am I flattering you with my experience and my undying love of this institution? And I think it'll become clear later on why I'm doing this. You know, I think in the days of fake news and fake declaration of presidents-elect, you can take comfort, Prof, in the fact that my declaration of love for this institution is true. On the 29th of October in 2010, at the South African Reserve Bank Conference Center, the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane Rural Development was launched. It was launched by, at that time, Minister Gugile Nkwinti, who was the Minister of Rural Development and Land Reform. Amongst the speakers, we had the then Chief Justice, Dikgamo Seneke, And amid the fanfare and excitement of the possibility of the future to uplift our people, we launched the foundation. And there was a media release, and the media release, and I quote, the media release said that the foundation was created to sort out the need and the challenges of the rural development of rural communities, in particular, in the agricultural sector. It further went on to say that the function of this institution would be to provide mentorship and advisory services to the farmers. It will provide technical assistance to the farmers. It will provide access to markets. It will provide access to finance, and it will collaborate with institutions of higher learning to look at research that can improve the lives of the rural people. And I think 10 years down the line, we ought to reflect on our experience as the foundation. And I think as a country, and do so honestly, I think it was Amilcar Cabral who said that hide nothing from the masses and claim no easy victories. So I think, and our experience as a foundation is very much similar and in line with the experience of the country. You know, when we launched the foundation, we had a lot of successful projects that were launched, and 10 years down the line, we've seen them vanish. And Prof, we could create a new library with the research as to why the failure rate that we experienced. I think it's almost like we have this lab-like environment that the experiences that the projects that we undertook in terms of why they didn't work. And I think it also rings true for land reform. You know, if we are very honest with ourselves in terms of 26 years down the line, in terms of our success rate with land reform, we unfortunately do not have the luxury of time. I think, you know, our people are drowning in poverty. And whilst for the past 26 years we had the luxury to have the fallacy of living in a cloud and coming up with fancy ideas, I think with COVID-19, the violent scream of poverty of our people has been even made louder by the floodgates that are opened by this pandemic. Before the lockdown, we had 12 million people in South Africa that went to bed hungry every day. You know, it's still mind-boggling to understand that number, that 12 million people went to bed hungry every evening before the lockdown. And I shudder to think what the number looks like after the lockdown. The reality is that poverty is a very harsh, extreme crime against humanity. And we ought to, as a people, really think about what it means in terms of humility and Ubuntu, and our efforts as a people to eradicate poverty and lift our people out of poverty. And those are some of the themes that rings true to the foundation and the work that the foundation does. We have over 20 million South Africa that live on tribal land, and at the heart of what the foundation stands for and what the foundation does is how do we economically productively use land that is available, particularly in the tribal land. You know, this is land that is already there. You know, we don't have to have all kinds of philosophical debates about land and its use. But I think from a human point of view, given the glaring poverty statistics that I've just mentioned, what is it that we are doing in our day-to-day lives as human beings to be extend the gratitude of relief to our fellow human beings in the issue of food security? As I said, you know, 12 million people, that number it really it bothers me a lot that we had 12 million people that went to bed hungry. And the problem in South Africa is not that we don't produce enough food. We do actually produce enough food. So the issue is affordability, the issue is poverty. And when we have the bulk of the poor staying in the rural communities, it then begs that we then look at rural development as the core measure and activity that we ought to undertake as a country to help our people. And that has been the effort of the foundation. And I was with Dr. Sam last week. We had a meeting. Dr. Sam is 93 years old, and it was a Friday. We had a meeting, and he had a meeting on Saturday and Sunday. And we often have to remind him that he needs to slow down. But, you know, he's so concerned about the development of our people that at 93, he takes meetings Monday to Sunday. And I think we as the youth have to start thinking about what is it that we're doing to improve the lives of our people. And Prof, now to why I was flattering you with my love for this institution. And remember, I said it still rings true that I love this institution. And thank you, you've done the heavy lifting for me. Mine was to convince you to, one, give us a home, and thank you that you've undertaken to work with the foundation. In our discussion with Dr. Sam last week, I said to him, you know, the question of land in South Africa is a very emotional issue. And it's inextricably linked to the history of South Africa. So South Africa is the history of land, and land is South Africa in essence from the very beginning. And I think given that we've seen how Europe was lifted out of poverty, Dr. Sam likes telling a story of the manorial system of the Lord of the Manor, which is very similar conditions to what we find ourselves in South Africa, where the title deed, the access to title deed empowered a lot of the people and lifted Europe out of poverty. And through that discussion, we said, you need a land institution in this country. And this land institution, as you were mentioning that you are extending a longer welcome to the foundation, we hope that we will be able to discuss the issue of the Land Institute further. And what the Land Institute, with the discussion that we had with the Omen and how we think and we view it, is that this institute needs to collate all the research that the universities are doing. And as the foundation, we hope together with the University of Pretoria that we will house this Land Institute that will bring forth all the research, but not just theoretical research, but also, Prof, you spoke about practical research that speaks to the questions that we face as a country, that comes up with practical solutions that we're able to implement to uplift our people. So we look forward to that, and I hope this will be the beginning that 30 years from now on we can say we've created 100 PhD students that came up with solutions. We need to create social entrepreneurs like Mohammed Janous that created the Gremlin Banking that comes up with solutions where business is used to also solve social problems. And we see this Land Institute also drawing to the private sector. We need that collaboration. As the foundation, we work with a lot of people. There's always this notions of left, right, and the middle center, but our view is that the issue of land is only going to be solved through collaboration. We've got the Transvaal Agricultural Union that comes and visit us. We have AFASA, Agri-SA, NAFU. We've got all these different organizations that comes with us. And I think it's the private sector that's set with the skills. So we appeal to the private sector to come to the party, to work with us in the University of Pretoria on the Land Institute to come up with solutions. And we look forward to a very fruitful relationship with the University of Pretoria. And may we look forward years from now on, and rest with peace, knowing that we've done everything that we can do to better and improve the lives of our people. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it, Paul. And now we come for the big deal, the big event, and the Chancellor of the university is here with us, a very powerful individual in his own right, very esteemed man of many awards and achievements, has inspired leadership in the business and professional communities, and many individuals swear by him and say he led the path over the years. And in recognition of his contribution to education, business, and development, Professor Nkuhlu has received a number of awards, including honorary doctorates from the universities of the Free State, Stellenbosch, Cape Town, Pretoria, Nelson Mandela, Metropolitan, Witwatersrand, and Fort Hare, and merit awards from the National African Federated Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Association for Advancement of Black Accountants of Southern Africa, and the Black Management Forum. He was also awarded the President of the Convocation Medal by the University of Cape Town in June 2004, and the medal is awarded to graduates of UCT for outstanding community service. Now, these are the awards that have been conferred on him, but in his personal capacity, he gets conferred with so many awards by individuals who meet him. They don't know what to give him, but they just confer something to him one way or another. I've observed this firsthand myself. Again, very privileged to have known Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu for so many years, interacted with him, and learned so much from him. And is the right person to come here and pay tribute to the man we hold in the highest regard possible, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane. Prof, thank you. You take all the time you need. But not too much time, but take all the time. Thank you, sir.
Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Really a pleasure to have this opportunity to take part in this very prestigious event. I greet Dr. Sam Motsuenyane, Professor Tawana Kupe, the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Pretoria, and the MEC, and all the people, the leaders who have joined us today.
Just
and of course,
sorry for the interruption there, Prof.
Something not working.
No, we want to swap the mics. There's something wrong with that mic, or probably it's placed the wrong side, I suspect.
I'm sure you know something about this thing. We work with them all the time.
This is daily bread. Yeah.
We apologize for this, but it's something that we will sort out in a few seconds' time. Just to remind you that the panel here is going to take questions or comments from you after Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu's remarks. So put your thinking caps on, pay attention, and come up with questions or comments that will enrich our lecture today.
Well, I was just greeting all of you and really saying how privileged I am to be here and participating in this very important event, to be delivering Dr. Sam's lecture today. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you some aspects of his rich life journey that I've found inspiring, captivating, and uplifting, as well as very relevant in thinking about the mindset that we need in order to extricate ourselves from the quagmire we're in as a country. I thank you all for joining us in celebrating his life and times. As it has been pointed out, he's 93 years old, but going strong. I had the privilege of visiting him at his farm in Winterveld not long ago. We took a drive around the farms and talked about the soil, what it means to us, what needs to be done to utilize the land more productively. My visit was after reading his book, that is his biography, A Testament of Hope, the autobiography of Dr. Sam Motsuenyane. I formulated the title of the lecture I'm presenting today on that day: Recapturing Self-Reliance and Resilience of Dr. Sam Motsuenyane's Generation. That's the title of my talk. I got really taken up by the demonstration of self-reliance and resilience at various stages of his life. The purpose of my visit was to gain first-hand information about how he lives and also how he feels about where we are as a country today. Of course, to hear him talk about his passion, the soil and the land, and also hear about what he would like us to do as a country to develop and work on the land to alleviate poverty and unemployment. One of the quotes that stuck with me from the book is the following: I have traveled all over the world. I have not seen one country where development did not start on the land. For development to be sustainable, it must begin on the land. And where land is properly and fully utilized, people won't go hungry. Then he goes on to say, it is a sin before God for people to have land and still starve. Big words. It's make all of us think. The subject of discourse in this lecture is the centrality of self-reliance and resilience and integrity in Dr. Sam's character, and how these attributes have enabled him to overcome adversity and achieve what many thought were beyond the reach of a black person under the exclusionary apartheid system. Of course, as we all know, his capabilities were recognized and appropriately utilized by the first democratically elected government post-1994. Naturally, the discussion leads to consideration of our current situation, whether we have retained the spirit of self-reliance and resilience that characterized Dr. Sam's generation. A related question is, what about the ethics and integrity of leaders, both in government and the private sector? As a starting point, let us look at where he grew up, Fontein Farm, where he was born. At the time of his birth, his father was one of the sharecroppers in Fontein Farm in the Free State. The sharecropping system was practiced virtually in all the provinces, where white farmers, Afrikaners in the Free State, who owned big farms, would enter into sharecropping arrangements with black people who had the interest, diligence, and experience to work on the land. Under the system, a third of the produce went to the owner of the farm, and the remaining two-thirds to the sharecroppers. The attractiveness of the system was that it incentivized black farm operators to work very hard to ensure that they maximize their share. Later, the family moved to another farm, Rietfontein, about 20 kilometers from Fontein. By this time, the young Dr. Sam was about 12 years old. I imagine that it was during this time that he got really involved in working on the farm in addition to schooling. So his love of the soil and working on the land is not a recently acquired novelty. It is in his blood. The moving around of the family finally came to an end when the family managed to buy its own plot of land at Valmanstal in 1939. Some of us cannot imagine where, 1939. This is where the young Dr. Sam completed his standard 6 in 1943, This was quite an accomplishment given the disruptions and demands of working on the farm. He was the first member of his family to pass Standard 6 at the age of almost 16 years. It is these experiences that prepared him for later challenges in life. He grew up in a family that was self-reliant, hardworking, and resilient, relying on its own resourcefulness and hard work to feed itself and nurture its children. The next stage was going to junior secondary. He went to Wilberforce. Again, that was very interesting times. And then after that, he couldn't continue because of the conditions, the difficulties of really retaining children at school, given the demands of big families. Then in 1947, he went to work, and during the time that he was working, he completed his matric through Lyceum Correspondence College. Then proceeded to, after working for some time, he proceeded to Jan Hofmeyr Social Work School in 1949. He was at Jan Hofmeyr School of Social Work for 3 years. Again, this period tested his resilience to the limit. He had to work very long hours, waking up at 5 a.m. to catch a train every day and return to his residence, Denver Men's Hostel, at 10 p.m. or later. As he says in the book, things got tougher during his second year. He had to take up another job because he did not have enough money to afford clothes. He took a position as a teacher in a night school at the Swiss Mission Church on Hyde Street, Durenfontein. The classes would end at 10 p.m. and he would reach his hostel residence only around 11 p.m. Then he had to cook a meal for himself and also study his own schoolwork for the following day. He did this for almost 2 years. Yes, his hard work and dedication did not go unnoticed. In his third year, he was invited to join a new project to initiate a rural social work outpost based in Ngoga Flats in the Cofimvaba district in Transkei. The objective of this initiative was to train social workers and that would work in rural communities. It is the experience he gained during the 5-month stay in Ngoga that later led to his appointment as the National Organizing Secretary of the African National Soil Conservation Association in 1953. As it is apparent from the name, the purpose of the association was to promote soil conservation throughout the country, and this resonated with Dr. Sam's interest in the soil. Much as it later got caught up in the race politics of the country and had to be abandoned, its original intentions were good and attracted many prominent African leaders, including W.J. Ngakane and J.M. Mohlale, who became its first president and deputy president. As the National Organizing Secretary, Dr. Sam traveled across the country promoting soil conservation as well as organizing national conference for the organization. This gave him an opportunity to meet many African leaders across the country and also gave him experience in leading and managing a national organization. About the same time that he worked for the ANSCA, Dr. Sam participated possibly in his first business venture, the Bumper Syndicate. He established a syndicate in 1955 with a group of friends, including Mr. Bigvai Masekela, who became the manager. The primary business of the syndicate was cartage. They bought trucks on hire purchase and hired them out for profit. They made a good start, but of course, like all startups, they had their own problems. On leaving the Soil Conservation Association, Dr. Sam explored a number of opportunities. However, fortunately, in 1959, he was invited to undertake a study tour of the United States of America under the sponsorship of USALEP, the United States South Africa Leadership Program, Exchange Program. Although he experienced some difficulties in obtaining a passport for himself and his wife, in the end, this proved to be a life-changing experience. The original idea was to spend 6 months traveling and visiting soil conservation programs throughout the United States. However, on arrival in New York, he managed to arrange a bursary from the African American Institute to study BSc in agriculture at the North Carolina College. As a consequence, 6 months got extended to 3 years. Given his hunger for knowledge and curiosity to learn from the experience of other nations, he took full advantage of his time in the United States. He was particularly struck by the racial discrimination against black people, especially in the South, and also by the living conditions of the Cherokee Indians. What he saw was no different from apartheid in South Africa. On the positive side, he also got introduced to black leadership in a number of institutions, as well as black-initiated, owned and managed banks and other businesses. However, the most rewarding experience was proving his academic capabilities in a different environment, competing with American students. This is what he says. I started at the bottom of my class, but did my best and never took a holiday in 3 years. He goes on to say, I worked so hard that in 1961, I was one of the top students in my class. Is this not wonderful? A young man from rural South Africa studying in the US and proving himself equal, to the best that the world can offer. On his return to South Africa at the end of 1962, he had to find a job. One would have thought that it would be easy with a BSc from the United States, but there were no opportunities for a black person with this qualification. In apartheid South Africa, a black person with his kind of qualification was just unemployable. Private agriculture and all institutions were in white, and all its institutions, the private sector with all its institutions were in white hands, and they were not employing blacks in professional and managerial positions. In government, a black graduate could only be employed by the Department of Bantu Agriculture, which the young Dr. Sam found objectionable. In the circumstances, he decided to use his agricultural knowledge to start a nursery in Soweto. He returned to the land and rented a plot for a nursery. This, together with his cottage business referred to earlier, became his commercial enterprises. By this time, his business partner, Bigvai Masekela, was the secretary of the Johannesburg African Chamber of Commerce, JACOC, and Mr. Richard Maponya was the chairman. Dr. Sam credits the two men for their great foresight and leadership in the formation of the National African Chamber of Commerce, NACOC, which later became NAFCOC in 1972. In the biography, he shares fond memories of Big Vi. He refers to the remarks that he used to make. Why we sleep when we are so much behind? Why should black people sleep when they were so much behind? This was, of course, reflective of the mindsets of black men and women who started their own businesses under the onerous, restrictive conditions imposed by apartheid. In actual fact, these men and women were rebels. They were asserting their God-given right to self-reliance and to use their God-given innate talents to feed their families and shape their destinies as their fathers and forefathers used to do. Do this despite restrictions imposed on them by the conquerors, that is the English and the Afrikaners. Dr. Sam comments as follows on the formation of NACOC. The organization could thus be construed to have been a protest movement to fight against a very restricted and restrictive business environment. There's no doubt that Richard Maponya, Big Vi Masekela, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane, and their colleagues were inspired by a deep sense of pride and defiance. They were born of men and women who grew up at a time when African communities were still free and self-reliant. That is the time before the final wars of dispossession that were fought in the 1870s. The Anglo-Pedi War of 1876 to 79, the Anglo-Zulu War in 1879, and the last Frontier War in the Cape in 1877. In these men and women, the spirit of self-reliance and resistance was still very strong. They were just not prepared to give up their way of life and acquiesce to subjugation to conditions imposed by their conquerors. This is why they thought of mobilizing black people to use their own resources and talents to build businesses and institutions that would rival those of the white people, rival those that the white people had built. It is these mindsets that led them to resolve to establish an African bank and to work tirelessly thereafter for the realization of this goal in their very first meeting of NACOC, very first conference of NACOC in 1964. As we all know, the African Bank became a reality in 1975. African traders managed to capitalize a bank from their own meager earnings. Not only that, throughout the mobilization period, which took 10 years, not a cent was stolen. Dr. Sam, as president of NAFCOC, with Mr. S.J.J. Lesolang as treasurer, managed the savings of their members with integrity. The establishment of the African Bank was followed by the Black Chain in 1977, and thereafter by the African Development and Construction Company. As hope you will agree, these were very ambitious projects demonstrative of self-confidence of the African people at that time. But unfortunately, this thinking proved proved to be beyond the imagination of our liberation movements, including the African National Congress and the Pan-Africanist Congress. Both movements could not connect to the fundamental principles and beliefs that had inspired the generation that built the African Bank and the Black Chain. They definitely did not see them as heroes, and as a consequence, did not see the need to build on their achievements. This is evidenced by the fact that when they were alerted that the African Bank, that is the pride of the NAFCOC stalwarts of the 1960s and the 70s, was on the verge of collapse in 1995, they failed to act. They did not intervene to ensure that the African Bank remained under the control of its original African owners. There are a number of possible explanations for this, which are too complex to cover in this lecture. But definitely, one is the erosion of self-confidence as African people as a consequence of subjugation and forced dependence on whites for jobs and other necessities. This experience entrenched self-doubt in our own capacity and capabilities, leading to lowering of ambitions and expectations. Yes, settling for facilitated participation in the existing economy instead of building new companies that are initiated and capitalized by Africans, in my view, will not earn us respect by white people in this country and of the citizens of the rest of the world. Above all, our feelings of self-doubt will not be completely erased. To deal with the damage to our self-confidence, we should make sure that our productive capacity and creativity is enhanced through accelerated and focused high-level knowledge and skills development. Then use the knowledge and skills acquired to build companies that would rival those of our white compatriots and make sure that the African-owned companies dominate the Johannesburg Stock Exchange because Africans are the majority in this country. Another reason could be that because of exploitation and denial of opportunities to be producers under colonialism and apartheid, we developed a distrust of business, and this has become entrenched and is proving to be difficult to expunge. Also, embracing Marxist socialism with all its anti-business rhetoric, as opposed to social market systems that characterize the Nordic countries, which promote both economic growth and equality, may be another factor. Whatever the reasons, history shows that no nation has ever developed without its members taking responsibility for their own development. Listen to what Dr. Motsuenyane says on this point. What hurts me most is to observe how far behind we still are economically when compared to other races in our country, and the level of poverty that is currently facing us. The problem is not going to be solved for us. We've got to solve it ourselves. Solutions will not come like manna from heaven. They come directly from us. We need to instill, as strong as possible, the spirit of self-reliance into our own people. Those are Dr. Sam Motsuenyane's words. To appreciate his convictions, look at what he has achieved in Winterveld. He mobilized landowners to use their land productively and to cooperate in sourcing inputs and technology. Each farmer taking responsibility for his own or her piece of land. They did not stop there. They worked together to establish a Winterfeld citrus project and then elevated their production activities to a bigger scale and up the value chain to processing of oranges and production of fruit juices. Now, imagine if his vision, Dr. Motsuenyane's vision, were embraced, what things would look like today. Just imagine the following. Imagine if there could be an equivalent of a Winterfeld United Farmers Association in every village in Limpopo, KwaZulu-Natal, Eastern Cape, etc. Each family using its land productively and engaging family members in productive work. Families competing with each other for recognition of the quality of their produce and upkeep of their lands. Farmers working cooperatively to source the best inputs and technologies, as well as moving up the value chain to wholesaling and agro-processing. This would heal the woundedness of many women and women whose sense of self-confidence and self-worth has been eroded by feelings of uselessness. Is this not what we need to alleviate poverty and unemployment? But your imagination must not end there. Imagine even further. If in addition to productive use of the land and agro-processing, there could be an equivalent of a Blake's store and an African development and construction company in every municipal district, as well as a branch of a reclaimed African bank, landing on development terms that place high priority on the character of the applicants, viability of the business to be financed, as well as competencies and experience of the borrower, and not primarily on collateral in the form of fixed assets as normally demanded by the banks. In addition, imagine if the government at all levels, national, provincial, and local, would procure its goods and services on preferential terms from registered, well-established African enterprises that are owned and managed by Africans with requisite knowledge and skills to produce quality goods and services. This would reward real African entrepreneurship and productivity instead of promoting gatekeepers and corruption. More importantly, this would redeem our dignity and restore respect of our fellow Africans and the rest of the world. If we could do all these things that we imagine, Dr. Sam's vision would be realized. The African people would become agents of their own development. Of course, for all this to happen, we would need to place in power a government that truly believes that sustainable development is only achievable when ordinary citizens are enabled and empowered to be agents of their own development. A government that understands that its role in development is indirect and limited. Even its power to alleviate poverty and unemployment through the budget is limited. Its real role is that of an enabler through policies, provision of priority social services, law and order, health, education, water, sanitation, etc., as well as infrastructure to support the economy. Above all, it has the crucial role of investing in the development of the productive and creative capacity of the people. Ladies and gentlemen, recapturing the self-reliance and resilience of Dr. Sam Motsuenyane's generation requires us to act on all the things imagined above. He and his generation of NAFCOC stalwarts of the 1960s and 70s have shown us the way. I'm deliberately saying NAFCOC stalwarts of the 60s and the 70s. I'm not talking about the 80s and the 90s or the 2000s. Now, it is the time for us who have had the privilege of working with him, with Dr. Sam, work with him closely as his disciples, like Paul. We should work together to regain African ownership and control of the African Bank. The members of the Winterfeld United Farmers Association and their children should resuscitate the Winterfeld Citrus Project. Above all, we should make sure that Dr. Motsuenyane's legacy is kept alive through the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane's Rural Development Foundation and his other projects. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope as South Africans, we still have the will and the determination to reconnect to this vision, to be proud, to be self-reliant, resilient, and men and women of integrity. And above all, people who are proud of their dignity and self-worth, so that we can take ownership and be agents of our development. This is Dr. Motsuenyane's legacy, and I hope all of us will be inspired by that. Thank you very much.
Indeed we are, Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu. Indeed we are. And thank you very much for those remarks and drawing out the lessons from Dr. Sam Motsuenyane's personal history, as well as his achievements. And a long journey well-traveled in Tate Motsuenyane. And we are very proud and pleased that these words are being said to you, Olite, that you can hear for yourself. And one would think that it's a story that should be heard by millions more people. But we will be this number that gets it. And we appreciate that the book has been published, the story is being told, and your values are being lived by those who understand what the score is. Actually, listening to you, Prof, I'm reminded of how the Chinese changed their approach to things after the Cultural Revolution and post Chairman Mao Zedong during the time of Deng Xiaoping, and they made that transition. But the specific thing that speaks to your speech that came to my mind is what was presented by Jiang Zemin in the early 90s. He came up with a concept called the three represents, which is actually captured in everything you said, because the Chinese were concerned about their pride and dignity as a people and their economic well-being on top of that, and respect around the world. And three represents, basically, he said, they must build consensus, political consensus, meaning the political activities should not be confined to only the members of the Communist Party. The second said they must harness the creative and cultural power of the Chinese people, meaning putting culture and the development of people at the center. And number three said unleashing the productive forces of the Chinese community. It was only now, yesterday, in the 90s, when he said that. It speaks for itself, doesn't it? Where they are today. Now, we don't need Jiang Zemin because we've got Jiang Zemin here. Our own Jiang Zemin. The difference is they listened to their Jiang Zemin. We are not listening here. it's not for me to speak. I'm here to ask questions, but I can't help, Prof, on the back of what you said. I was thinking of the 350 rand relief to the unemployed. It's ending now in January. And that's it. Now, if that 350 had gone the route that you suggest, it would not just be 350 until January. It would continue and become 600, it would become 2,000, it would become 3,000, it would become more and more. In fact, we won't talk unemployment. We'll be talking more employment, more exports. You name it. I leave it at that. So thanks very much, Prof. Thank you. You heard for yourselves, right? So, sometimes it can be very frustrating that the power to think, the power to do is still there, but we don't do. We go somewhere else and do things that just keep us right there. Anyway, we're going to take questions. Your questions and your comments. Thank you.
These spaces may seem quiet. They may seem empty, but they're not. They're filled with knowledge, innovation, and a drive to find the answers to the world's most pressing questions. That is why the University of Pretoria works towards finding the answers that support communities in the fight against COVID-19. We contributed to the systems and protocols in Gauteng hospitals. We provide community screenings and take part in clinical trials. We are creating 3D printed face shields and developed one of the first real-time interactive COVID-19 apps. We do not know what the future may hold, but it is our responsibility to find the answers. These spaces are not empty. The University of Pretoria, a world of answers.
Thank you again. We're going to have a panel discussion, and by way of questions to the panelists. And let me start with a question that has to be answered again and pose it to our chairman, Paul Ntsabele, just to expand a bit more, well, tell us, the rationale for the existence of the Development Foundation, because the lecture is the lecture so we can share ideas and learn, but there's a reason why the foundation exists and where it's going to.
No, thanks, Ramolife. I think to answer you, I'll speak about three salient points that Professor Kupe made. That fits right in like a glove with the reason why the foundation exists. And 3 weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, we had Khosi Makapane of Makapanstad that came to visit Dr. Sam Motsuenyane. He came to visit because he's concerned about the lack of agricultural or any productive activity on his land. In the Makapanstad area, where you've got the Pinar River and the Moretele River meandering through the 30 villages that he presides of as a king. What was interesting is that a few years ago, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane told me that his great-grandfather, 50 years ago, came to visit him, discussing the very same issue of development. He came at the time, Dr. Sam Motsuenyane had come back from the United States at University of Northern Carolina after studying agronomy, and the king's great-grandfather, King Makapane, 50 years ago, came to see the old man and asked them, what is it that we can do to develop and productively use our land? So it's quite a concern that 50 years later, the same question 3 generations later is asked. And I think that's at the heart of why we exist as a foundation. And at the heart of why we exist is that we want to see the productive use of land. We, as the foundation, view land as an asset. And how do you monetize that asset so that it productively and economically empowers the people? And we exist because we see the silo that which the system operates. Tim, you were interviewing Dr. Khosi Rantu last night, and you're asking him about the investment summit and the President's Economic Recovery Plan. And he made an example, and he said to you, the problem is structural. So you have issues of procurement, where we use the same procurement system for a very complex engineering technical project as we do for catering for 50 people in a municipality. And I think we see the same issue with agriculture, where you have this very complex industry, that's very scientific, that requires scientific knowledge and technical assistance, where, if you are buying seeds, for example, and you need to plant specific variety of seed at a particular place, where that place, given the climate and the soil, is specific to that seed, where the procurement system are used as though you are procuring stationery. So Professor Kupe mentioned 3 issues. He said, one, the university's new Future Africa campus is designed, and he made reference to where researchers come up with research questions where you're almost anticipating the question, or you're formulating the research to answer a specific question. And our view is that Africa, and South Africa in particular, has a very unique set of circumstances that exist, and it requires us to create literature and to create new knowledge which will be able to solve our own problems in a very unique way. We cannot use a system that exists in the West or in the East. For example, if you look at the land tenure system, should we create a hybrid land tenure system? So those are some of the reasons, one of the reasons in terms of what the 3 issues that Professor Kupe mentioned. We exist to challenge the knowledge that we think exists and to create new knowledge that is very suitable to our condition to solve our problems. Prof. Kupe mentioned that a kilometer from here, there's a 4.0 campus. We think that technology can be used as a bridge in the divide between, because you have a very sophisticated commercial agriculture in this country. And then in the same opposite coin, you have an underdeveloped agriculture. And we think technology can be that bridge that shortens that gap. And we're quite excited about what Prof was saying in terms of working with us, and we wait with anticipation for that letter to see how we can come up with technological, innovative ways to solve some of the issues that we have. And lastly, Prof, you mentioned the issue of the dairy farm, where you spoke about precision farming. We think that's the way to go in terms, as a foundation, in terms of making sure that our people are able to use precision farming as and agronomical practices that are true to the science in terms of making sure that we have successful projects. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Paul. The next question goes to you, both the professors. Let me start with Professor Nkuhlu to give his own views on this. One of the things that we know in the foundation is that as much as the inspiration is there, the will to make things happen is there, it has been very difficult to raise funds, particularly, frankly, MEC, to get support from government has been almost impossible. And this has been for a very, very long time. So it's just, pull in an influential person here, get a little bit of support there, and these projects, for them to be sustainable, they require ongoing support. And some of the support has come from even the true story, personal funds of Dr. Motsuenyane himself. And this I've observed firsthand. And Paul knows, he can confirm the story, because the project could not be allowed to collapse at a particular time. So it's been very difficult to bring this working together to make it work. What are your thoughts? What is the best way to get all interested parties on the same page to support not only the Dr. Motsuenyane's foundation, but foundations of this nature, given the objectives that they are trying to achieve?
Yes, if I may venture, For a foundation like the one that Paul is talking about, Dr. Motsuenyane's Rural Foundation, the challenge is getting it accepted as a pilot, of the kind of things how we should, as a country, we should approach rural development or development of the townships. It's only when we can get that thinking accepted that this is one of a very important pilots in this. And then in that context, I think if I was in government, I would be looking for projects like this, where you would say the big challenge is that we have fertile land that is out there, that is not being used productively. And that for us as a government, we've got a challenge of providing, dealing with poverty and unemployment. And we all know that what would make progress towards reducing poverty and unemployment on a sustainable basis is getting people to be productive themselves. So redirect some of the grant funding that is made available all over to support productive activities by the people that over time will be self-sustaining. Yeah, it's a long process, but I'm saying Professor Kupe about fundraising, he knows better. But for me, as South Africans, we must look towards the interventions that would lead to development, sustainable development, that is no longer dependent on the government, and also our people no longer looking for government for handouts, but saying that once the foundation is laid, the businesses will be generating enough revenue themselves to support employed people.
Thank you, Prof. And MEC, if you want to comment at a later point, I'll give you the opportunity to. But something that comes to my mind in the context of the question is, you may have the Winterveld Citrus Farmers Association, and they have the orchards and they do that. Then they have a need for water to be drawn from somewhere.
Yes.
Now, that is where one would think, government would come readily to do that. But having observed it, and it doesn't happen as quickly and as easily as we can imagine, and it has had its own effects. And this is a story that happened many years ago, several years ago. So those are some of the things that become an issue. But Prof, in terms of the university, how are you developing current and future leadership based on the values that Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu spoke about and that are epitomized by Dr. Sam Motsuenyane?
Well, let me just mention 3 examples. It might not be known to the general public that we host for 10 years now a center which we have transformed into an institute. Well, there's a hierarchy at the university. A center is a junior to an institute. We had a center called the Albert Luthuli Center for Responsible Leadership. Last year I discussed with the leadership, and this year at the Senate is the parliament of the university, and I chaired the Senate. We've transformed it now into the Albert Luthuli Leadership Institute. Now, that Leadership Institute, as you all know, Inkosi Albert Luthuli was the first Nobel Peace Prize winner of African origin, of the African continent. And he epitomized certain leadership qualities that you can associate with that are exhibited by the likes of Dr. Sam. And what is this? People-centered leadership, or what people call these days servant leadership. A people-centered leadership recognizes that by assuming a leadership position, something has come to you. Now you have to give something back, or those qualities must be. And Prof. Nkuhlu here elucidated on some of those. You must exhibit yourself a sense of integrity, and then also accountability, self-reliance. You must inspire others to actually, in a sense, embark on projects of self-development. So at the at the Chief Luthuli Center now, Institute now rather, One of the things that we host there is all of our programs to do with the Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them. And remember that all of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are around recognizing the inequities that Paul spoke about between the North ourselves and within South Africa itself, being one of the being the most unequal society in the world. At the Institute, we also work with the government, for example, in writing the report that it has to, because every government has to report to the United Nations on the Sustainable Development Goals. So we also run a very unique master's degree. It's called a master's degree in development practice. And this master's degree in development practice is taken by students from all over the continent, but a large majority, of course, being a South African university, are South Africans. The first cohort graduated last year, will graduate a second cohort. These are people who are learning development in the context in which self-reliance is very, very important, contextual knowledge, as Paul said, creating knowledge, not consuming knowledge. And at the University of Pretoria, I'm trying to advance another principle, which is not just creating knowledge as a star individual, the star professor. That's a traditional model. We're advancing a model called co-creating knowledge. And also, this knowledge must actually be a knowledge where you break the silos. The problem with the university is that it has departments: economics, politics, geography, physics, chemistry. All of those people could be on different planets, and they'll be good at it. But what you need to do is that to solve the kinds of problems that we have in South Africa and Africa, you need to break all of those silos. So our economists, for example, need to understand that the economics of the continent cannot be the economics that you find in Europe or North America. It's a particular kind of economics, the two icons, and Paul elucidated on it, which is layered upon, if you like, exploitation and oppression, even depriving people of their self-will, which is what Prof. Nkuhlu was talking about. So in all of our programs, if you like, at the Albert Luthuli Center, we're going back into saying, understand where history has come from and what models of development it has bequeathed us, and learn that and create new knowledge that is contextually relevant. And also we're using the SDGs as one of the one of the things we use to hang this development model. The SDGs have their own shortcomings, by the way. And so it's for us, the SDGs are a beginning, not the end of the journey. Then second, at the business school, our business school is in Johannesburg, Gibbs. People popularly know it as Gibbs. Arising out of the things that happened, not just over the last decade. People often think that our problems arise over the last 10 years only, the so-called lost decade and state capture and whatever. There are fundamental issues of integrity, accountability, and people seeking to build themselves and not to build our communities and to build our country. So we started there with a dialogue series on ethical leadership. And so these ethical leadership dialogues, we have now approved a plan to make it an ethical leadership center, focused also at the private sector. Because people often think that corruption is only in government. Corruption is all over. And Steinhoff is a great example of how it's one of the biggest corruption scandals of the century. Right? But nothing has happened there. But it emanated from the private sector. And the private sector intersects with the public sector, and their corruption can thrive. So we're going to also to link the Ethics Center at Gibbs together with the Albert Luthuli Leadership Center as well, and build more programs. Third and last, among those, I'm just only mentioning three. We run very extensive system of leadership training for students, from undergraduate to postgraduate. And also, if you have noticed at the University of Pretoria, our SRC is made up of students from all the political formations, including independent students. But you will never know this because they all, on a daily basis, wear the same uniform of the SRC. It is to instill the fact that once elected, you are leader of everybody, not just those who put you in power, and that your role is not patronage. is building and exercising a people-centered leadership. And we draw our values from all of our icons, you know, from the Mandelas and that generation, this Dr. Sams and others, Prof. Nkuhlu and others. Those are the case studies we are using. So at the business school, I've also asked them, and the Lutuli Center, for us to build case studies of ethical, accountable, people-centered leadership. And those will be, we will then use those in teaching.
Thank you, Prof. I'm going to take a comment or question, a few, from yourselves, from the floor here, and I'd like to take a look at those that are coming through virtually. If they are, please put them on the screen. Just a comment, Professor Nkuhlu, at some point you can comment to this. You know, my observation is that when people are appointed to important positions in the public sector in particular, it looks like it could be more politics and maybe technical competency, but not character that is looked at. And you know, and I would like to believe that character is a very, very important thing in equality in leadership. So let's we start.
Is that yours?
Okay, Percival Gonde says, how do small tech businesses get involved in these initiatives? Who wants to take that question? Paul, I think it's you. Hold on a second, hold on to that. Just note the question. And I would like to hear from member of the audience here. Yes. Dr. Motsuenyane, how are you, sir?
I'm fine. I'm not responding to the question. I wanted to make a comment.
Yeah. Please go ahead, sir.
Of course. Okay. Thanks very much. First and foremost, let me start with an apology. I had an appointment for this morning at 10:30, and then I got an SMS from Paul, who said, Dr. Motsuenyane instructs that you must be at the University of Pretoria at 10:30. so I'm not fond of saying no to Dr. Motsuenyane. But now that meeting is coming this afternoon, so I'm very sorry about it. Thanks very much to Professor Nkuhlu and to really Paul, and particularly to Professor Kupe on the remarks that were made, particularly the last comments that he made and so on, because the point that was made by Professor Nkuhlu and Dr. Motsuenyane, that the ANC and PAC simply did not understand issues, I believe that that's an understatement. It was worse than that. The fact of saving the African bank was not merely saving a bank. It had far more greater significance, and in it was embodied the integrity of the African majority. But unfortunately, our politicians missed it completely, and that bank was not saved. Now, when I say that's an understatement, I've looked at all the points that have been made about the SDGs, and also in the National Development Plan. I'm a member of the National Planning Commission, and so on. All our strategies on economic development seem to be reliant on the orthodoxy. And the orthodoxy are the methods of development that are based in the developed world, the market, laissez-faire, and all those issues. And then we told ourselves when we introduced CARE that we're going to use these organizations to develop ourselves. Now, the first question that one had to ask was, if I am this big multinational, whether it's South African or it's overseas, why would I nurture a future competitor? I hope my point is seen. So we have used a methodology that says we are going to piggyback on existing capital. But existing capital, its objective is not to develop us. its objective is to maximize its returns, its profits, and so on. Now the problem is that we then seem not to be aware of that. We then continue having this implacable faith in that is, if we stick to the orthodoxy, things are going to happen. Now, I'm trying to find out until when, perhaps, can we overcome those decades and decades of intellectual oppression? Because I'm currently busy now with research. And that research is on why black entrepreneurs are not doing that well. And what has come out is that there are three variables. One is self-efficacy, the second one is entitlement, and the third one is dependency. So now if I told you look at these three variables, you can see that they are a direct result of the apartheid policies that the continent has been subjected to, the colonial policies which said blacks are inferior. Now, if at all you've been told for centuries that you are inferior, doesn't mean that in 1994, when the colonial flag goes down, all of a sudden, you are going to feel that you are superior. That inferiority complex is going to continue, and it's continuing up till to this day. Now, how do we find ways in which we can overcome that? And the last point I would like to make is that there are deep-seated constraints in our economy. The first one is that our economy is heavily concentrated. The second thing is that the incumbents have got deep pockets, and they have got, more advanced technology. They've got a much more advanced knowledge of markets and products. And above all, South Africa has a big business mindset. We can say I used to work in the Department of Small Business Development. When the budget that is given to the Department of Small Business Development is 0.013 on the national budget, it shows you the mindset of the country. Now, these are the issues that are affecting our economic progress. That is why when we took over in 1994, unemployment was at 20%. Today, unemployment is at 31%. Even though, we can blame COVID, but even during the COVID, just before COVID, it was still at that 28, 29, and so on. And when you look at the issue of inequality, the Gini coefficient has persistently stayed at close to 0.70, which is the highest in the world. And when you look at poverty, up to 2015, the Africans who got out of poverty did so because of government grants, not because of economic growth. Now, because of COVID, even those people who got out of poverty are now going back into poverty, which was a presentation made by the UNDP, which Professor Kupe was part of, and so on. So this is how critical the situation is. So the 12 million people who go to bed hungry, Paul, have now increased, and so on. They have now increased. Now, how do we, is the question, find a way in which we get a situation in which all these factors are taken into account. And we have a much more aggressive address at economic restructuring than the current situation in which we believe that we've got to hold hands with the incumbents. I've got nothing wrong with the right of the incumbents to be here. We've got our economic policy is very market-orientated, and they've got to be here because they bring in other benefits that would not normally have. But how do we get into a situation in which we get our government particularly at national level, understand that, that economic growth has got to be endogenous rather than exogenous. You've got to build from the bottom, and that's how you are going to get your economic growth, than having policies that really keep on saying that don't interfere, don't scare the investors away. And that seems to be what our problem is. So these are the few points I would like to make to say I appreciate the comments made by Professor Nkuhlu, and I have got the utmost respect for the role that the Motsuenyanes, Maponyas have played in defying odds to be what they are.
Yeah.
The question is, when the Afrikaners were in power, they had Afrikaner empowerment. And then they created the Sanlams, Volkskas, and so on. Our black economic empowerment is premised on getting 5% of Sanlam. Isn't there something wrong there?
Sure. Well,
Isn't there something wrong there?
Yeah.
So these are the humble points I thought I would make, and when I sneak out, please forgive me.
Yes.
I could not define Dr Motsuenyane.
and if I may say, and thanks very much, Bratami, for the comments and the question. In a way, that's a South African question, really. Yeah. I suppose that we all must reflect on. I doubt that anyone here will say, this is the answer, and then we move to the next question. Yeah, I agree. I'm just saying, as we move on, that you've given us food for thought.
Yes.
And I'm speaking also to the audience that's joined us virtually, all of us in this room. You're correct, including the policymakers and influential people in the media elsewhere, that this is the question and probably the way we should think when we engage the economy and the economic issues. I'm going to ask you, Paul, to respond to that question. And then, MEC, if you want to make your remarks, probably take one question because time is also the issue for us. I want Dr. Motsuenyane to make the concluding remarks as we round up. Paul, please respond, and then MEC, I'll hear from you, and then I'll take a question or comment, and then we'll wrap, I think.
Okay.
Okay, I'll take 1, 2. I'm going to ask you to be very brief when you make your comments, but Paul, in the meantime, go ahead.
Sorry, Tim, am I responding to
To this question.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think the question is, how do small tech businesses get involved in this initiative? So, Mo Ibrahim Foundation released a very interesting study a few years ago, which looked at where Africa and the world is going to be in 2050, and they focused on technology. I think they were saying that Africa needs about 3.5 million tractors to be on par with the world, and that we only use 20 or 30% fertilizer usage in Africa. And being the continent that has the largest arable land available, we need to play a critical role in feeding Africa. So how does technology play a role and get involved? So instead of talking about 3.5 million tractors, which is a very capital-intensive exercise, given how much a tractor costs, we now have people that are using drones that are doing the same job as some of the tractors, some of the sprayers, boom sprayers that we used to use do. You know, in South Africa, we have a extension officer ratio of about 1,000. For every one extension officer, we've got about 1,200 farmers, meaning that if that extension officer visits farms every day, he's not going to be able to visit even more than half of those farms. Whereas in the commercial sector, the extension farmer ratio is about 1 to 60. And that speaks to why we're not able to provide technical assistance to our people. So how does tech get involved? You know, when you are able to create software that is able to discharge the extension service to our people, where you don't need one person visiting 1,200 farms, but they can do GIS and work with the satellite and able to use GIS to map the location of the rural area and to do remote sensing and classification of the soil, to be able to provide technical advice, and discharge that agronomical technical service to our people using technology, will be able to bridge that gap. So as a foundation, we've worked with a few agribusinesses, and we always welcome tech companies and all kinds of companies to collaborate with us and try new technology.
Thank you very much, Paul. Pardon me, I'm going to be very strict. 3 comments, a minute each. MEC, a few remarks from you, and then Dr. Motsuenyane, you make the concluding remarks. It's not me, it's time that dictates that we do it that way. It's almost 1 o'clock, and we should have been done by 12:30. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I am Elias Matipa. Professor Nkuhlu has made a fundamental remark to say that at the age of 12 already, Dr. Motsuenyane was involved in the land as an agricultural person, as a farmer, etc., at the age of 12. Now, my point is that here we are talking about a foundation. A foundation is the basis upon which the structure is being built. Now, I'm looking at the university and saying they are producers of teachers. Do they produce the teachers that will teach agriculture to the primary schools around the areas like Tswaying and others, so that the young children who are our future or tomorrow, they know what agriculture is and what the land is? That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is it me?
In a way, you're on the spot, MEC, so I don't
Okay.
want you to comment because something might be said about you or your role. So rather have sort of the last word on the points that have been made. Can you grab the mic here and then... Roel, can you get the mic from here, and then I'll come to you and you, ma'am, and then we must wrap. Go ahead. Go ahead.
My name is Matloko. I represent a transport organization that would like to link very much with the foundation. And secondly is that since the chairman has talked about tech, we will be definitely contacting him so that we get his details and become involved with him. Because in transport, remember now, even if you can produce, if you cannot take the goods on time to the people, it's useless. And that's why you find today that in transport, in a black person's mind, is taxi. And he says taxi is war. So it's because we've got nothing to think about diversification at all in terms of transportation. So we want to bring another perspective to transport and dignity, to transport that can be led by black people. Thank you.
All right, Paul, there you've got your additional work, and you, ma'am, Roel, in the meantime, before we come to you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. I've got a feeling that says that at last, the foundation has landed. I know it has been a struggle, Tim, to get it to a pitch where it is now. And I believe it has come at the right time because Ndate's very anxious. He always reminds us that he's at the sunset of his life. So he's on an overdrive with these programs. There are others that he's chasing too. But to come to the real issues here, I would want to make an appeal to government through Morakana here. If the government could pause a bit in making new laws and implement the current ones in agriculture, and then learn lessons from it as to exactly why they are failing or where the improvement is needed. Two, the issue of extension officers, Nsabela, you are very much correct, I last saw an extension officer in 1994. The real extension officers. Today you see directors and then deputy directors. We're running a citrus project which has collapsed, literally. Simply because, amongst others, we did not have the benefit of committed and passionate agricultural extension officers. We could learn lesson whether we like it or not in the area of Putatswana team, you know. We had a robust, where Mangope had what one would comparatively say were a robust agricultural development infrastructure. We have not used it, we have not leveraged anything from it, simply because we thought exactly like Professor Nkuhlu was saying here. So my appeal is that Memurakan, this is the major challenge. If we can get committed, passionate extension officers, they will fit into our system on programs that we have on the ground. And then that would lay, I believe, a foundation for any further development. Thank you.
Hello, ma'am.
Thank you very much. My name is Sam Motsuenyane. Our government has adopted a dominant need-based approach, which has bred a lot of dependence and entitlement in our communities. And hence, more than 80% of our black communities are said to be at the bottom of the pyramid. And they are labeled the poorest of the poor. And they go about with that label that we are the poorest of the poor, and we've got nothing to contribute to our own development. And I think the foundation is existing to shift that thinking from a need-based approach, which is currently dominant in government, towards an asset-based approach, which says you are not an empty cup. You've got something in you. And what is required is for us to come and top up what we have. But the current approach in government, it's that which sees people as half-empty glasses rather than half-full glasses. So the foundation exists in order to shift that mindset. Hence, the focus of the foundation is at the bottom of the pyramid. Now, we've got a social protection system that is supposed to be transformative, but it is not transformative at all. And yet, on paper, it is supposed to be. It limits people to seeing these grants simply as income support. And if those grants go into communities, and it's millions of money, and immediately they land in the community, they live to make the rich get richer instead of having systems that would be driven by such foundations to say, wake up, there is money that flows into your community, but instead of this money circulating in the community to regenerate your economy, this money is leaking out. Now, what I also would like to say is the funding structure and the funding policies of foundations and NGOs should also focus on funding, on redirecting the funding to these foundations that are actually developmental in approach so that they can lead development. I'm saying this because in my family, for 3 years, we have been applying, just to test the system for an agricultural grant, and only to establish that the people who are in the system, who are getting grant support from agriculture every year, have been in the system for many years, but they don't exit. Why are they not exiting? Because they've got to give space. So if it is that money should come to such foundations, these foundations would be able to make sure that the money is distributed and is contributing to development of emerging farmers equally. Thank you.
One last comment at the back, and then MEC, and then Tate Motsuenyane. Go ahead. Can we take the microphone too? The MEC, yeah, thank you.
Thank
Go
you.
ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Tim. Let me also apologize for arriving late for this session. I am based in Durban, and the email came in yesterday, and I had to confirm my attendance for this meeting. I live in a peri-urban area between the city of eThekwini and the agricultural community of Imbumbulu. Every day, I interact with modernity or should I say civilization in its form in the city life, as well as rural existence, parallel next to each other. I want to respond to 3 things that have been raised at this meeting. The first one relates to when I arrived here, the professor, Prof. Nkuhlu, was talking about black ambitions within the banking and financial services sector. I certainly think maybe African people have been very patient in this space, and it becomes an enabler to a number of entrepreneurial initiatives. And I certainly think that conversation, and I'm glad that Oprah Mazwai is here from the National Planning Commission. There has to be a work stream that looks at ensuring that government processes are facilitating the participation of black people within the financial services sector through ownership of a bank as well as insurance industry. In terms of what needs to be done, Prati, with the 27 years of learning, localization, localization, localization. You grow your value chains in South Africa. Naturally, you want to attract investment, but after a certain point in time, it's localization, localization. Lastly, I also wish to work closely with the Dr. Sam Motsuenyane Foundation with a number of community activities within KwaZulu-Natal, primarily for knowledge sharing, and also to challenge this meeting that the Department of Education...
I'm afraid I'm going to refer you to Paul.
Let me...
I'll tell you
yes.
why in a moment. We have to be out of here by 1:30.
My apologies.
And Dr. Motsuenyane has not spoken. I'm not being rude to you or to anyone. I feel I must declare.
My apologies.
That the kind of pressure that I'm under is going to leave us not organized when we finish.
I'll wrap up in less than 30 seconds. Department of Basic Education, at some point, declared that there are non-viable schools because of their distance and so on. Shouldn't those be looked at as agricultural training centers for communities to assist communities to cooperatize agriculture? Thank you.
Thank you. MEC?
Thank you very much, Program Director. I'm going to be very quick. There were 4 things that I wanted to speak to, so I'll speak to only 3 that, in my opinion, are important that I speak to. And I'll start with the easiest one. The gentleman who just spoke right now spoke about the importance of localization. But localization cannot happen if government does not drive it. So what we did as a department, as Gauteng government, was that we realized the fact that the policies that we had were not supporting the intention of localization. Fortunately or unfortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, COVID-19 happened, and it forced us to then localize in essence. And we actually went to the extent of having to realize and accept the fact that for it to happen and for it to be implemented and implemented properly, we have to legislate. So we're going that route. Very soon we'll be bothering you. We have a relationship already with the university, Prof, as you know. So we will be bothering you. There will be a paper coming your way for you to look at it and tell us if we are mad or crazy or if we are doing is correct and advise us in that direction. So we have to implement that, or rather I have to take that to EXCO by February next year. So it will be coming very soon to yourselves. Look, if we don't localize, all of our businesses are going to fail. All of the things that we're talking about will just be pie in the sky. It's not going to happen. So we're facing reality. This young man here, I'm still going to bother you again next week. We have another appointment about the things that he was talking about. We have farmers that we work with. We want to commercialize. And unfortunately, after we exit the program that we have with them, they fail. So the question is, why is that happening? What is it that we're doing that we're not doing correct? You spoke to it earlier on in your opening remarks, Prof. So we are going to look at that. But then you asked the question, Tim, about the water problems that they have in Winterveld. That's the problem, in my opinion, and I hope where you work, you'll be also able to help us answer this question. There's the responsibilities between the three spheres of government. Provision of water lies elsewhere. Provision of something else lies at province, or something else lies at national. Why do we have that disjoint? If we don't correct that, most of the things that we want to do are bound to fail. So we need to correct quite a number of things for us to be able to do what we intend to do. So Professor Nkuhlu, I think you also spoke about, I said 3, so I'm just throwing in the last one, the 4th one. You spoke about aggregating, I'm not quite sure, I'm stand corrected, I'm not sure which of the professors spoke about that. Aggregation of knowledge and whatever it is that we want to implement as government, I think that's another area where we get it wrong. We have information, but we don't know how to implement it. I'm being honest. I shared that information with you. When I met with him, I said, there's all of these things that are before me, and I'm supposed to do this, that, and the other, and these are supposed to be the solutions. But in my opinion, they don't speak to each other, and I don't think I'm going to succeed. I might do this maybe for a short period of time, but then what happens beyond this? So if we don't correct the implementation, we are bound to fail. So I'll leave it at that. I have a lot to say, but I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We are here in Dr Motsuenyane because this is your day, and Prof. Nkuhlu, once more, thank you very much for paying tribute to South Africa's icon and extracting the values out of his life story. The turn is yours, Dr., to speak to us, and you are the final person to speak. After that, we break this lecture. Thank you.
Mr. MC, Chancellor, Professor Nkuhlu, Vice-Chancellor, and Tawana Kupe, and I feel extremely honored and privileged to be called upon to pass a vote of thanks to all those revered individuals who have participated in making arrangements for this, the 3rd Dr. Motsuenyane annual lecture. The success which has been attained in the preparations for this year's lecture, notwithstanding the restrictions of COVID-19, primarily due to the praiseworthy involvement of Pretoria University, who not only provided the foundation with a suitable venue, but the university staff was also made available to handle everything else connected with the holding of this lecture. We must all applaud this university for their generous contribution to the hosting of our foundation, which I hope marks the beginning of a strong and desirable relationship. On behalf of Motsuenyane Rural Development Foundation, let me especially extend our profound gratitude to the Vice-Chancellor, Professor Kupe, for his encouraging statement and remarks at the beginning of the lecture. Our foundation is very fortunate to have well-qualified young people at the helm of its leadership. We need, however, to attract more young graduates and intellectuals into joining the foundation in future. This must be done to build leadership and management capacity within the organization. The present chairman of the Motsuenyane Foundation, Paul Nsabele, who is a product of this university, is a well-qualified agronomist. He succeeds Mrs. Angie Makwetla, who was herself a qualified and capable professional who led the organization for a period of 6 years. We are thankful to have been able to attract Paul Ntsabele to lead the foundation at this time, not only because of his good qualifications, but more fittingly because he is young and he has integrity and a strong passion and commitment to provide service to his community wherever this is required. We sincerely appreciate the thought-provoking ideas expressed in his maiden chairman's address. To Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu, who is also the Chancellor of Pretoria University, we owe profound gratitude for his inspiring, erudite, and challenging lecture this morning. I have known and worked with him for many years whilst serving as president of NAFCOC and chairman of the African Bank for more than 20 years. His historically appropriate and well-timed message, I conclude, to the present generation of black leaders ought to be quite seriously taken into consideration and not ignored or belittled. What has gone wrong with us today must be put right, not only not in the long term, but in the immediate future. I can recall something wise that was said by my primary school principal at Lopas Ntuli, who once said to us, we should resist evils at the beginning, lest they overcome us at the end. Yes, we have to hastily get rid of things like corruption, which is rapidly destroying our nation's moral fiber. We also need, as soon as possible, to recapture the virtues and values we have lost and become increasingly a creative, proud people deeply imbued with the spirit of self-reliance and self-worth. To shape our destiny, nobody else should do that for us except ourselves. Yes. Thank you very much, Prof, for your enlightening and inspiring address. To Tim Modise, our MC, we are immensely grateful for the able and meticulous manner in which you conducted the proceedings of our third annual lecture this morning. We assigned you the difficult task of being MC on this occasion because we knew well that nobody else in our ranks could surpass your excellence. Many thanks for a job well done. Let me, in conclusion, say to our audience present here and elsewhere on the media network, we extremely value and appreciate your support and attendance at this lecture and hope that you will in future continue to give the Motsuenyane Rural Development Foundation every help that is affordable. The Motsuenyane Rural Development Foundation aspires to create a strong relationship with all centers of learning. I am here referring to institutions such as Pretoria University, other universities, as well as tertiary institutions in the country. This must be done to ensure that such institutions are granted opportunity and sufficient scope to participate in the projects initiated by the foundation all over South Africa, where rural development projects, especially in agriculture, in the agricultural space, have to be embarked upon. It is the foundation's strong conviction that the many problems we face, such as poverty, unemployment, and the lack of advancement in the business, technical, and industrial sectors, can only be successfully tackled and overcome if more private sector companies, research, and educational institutions could be induced to play a more significant role in helping to foster development in underdeveloped areas in South Africa. Thank you very much for the time.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, Professor Kupe, for your generosity, and also to your institution here for hosting us. We appreciate very much. Professor Wiseman Nkuhlu, investing your time and love and commitment to your friend, and by extension to all of us, we appreciate your lecture. Dr. Motsuenyane, for living a life of an exemplary life that speaks for itself and continues to promote the values that we should live by for our own benefit, for that matter. We appreciate your example and your presence here. To the attendees, all of you who are busy people, we appreciate MEC. Your presence is valued because at least we could say certain things directly to you, which somehow will translate into practical things. So that's why it's, we appreciate your presence here. And to your inputs, everybody else who's made those inputs, thank you for enriching the thinking of this afternoon. And those who joined us virtually, again, thank you for making the time to be part of this. The technical team, thanks for making this a success. We appreciate it. Have a great day, and I hope we'll all go back to our respective places and try and plant seeds of what we learned here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you take it?
Yeah.